Welcome back to FM Jeeping. My name is Mark, and today I'm going to be answering some questions that I've been getting about my one-ton swap, some do's and don'ts, and the overall cost of what it took to put one-tons under my Jeep. So I will get into the cost of what it took to put the one-tons under my Jeep for my application, but we'll get to that a little later on in this video. First, I want to cover some questions that I've been getting on social media. So if you follow me on any of my social media platforms, which is mainly Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, you know that I put a post out asking for questions about the one-ton swap, or if anybody had any questions or looking for advice. So I'm going to read some of those questions that I got, and then we'll cover what the cost was of my one-ton swap. So the first question comes from Rowdy Performance Diesel on Instagram, asking what lockers and what gear sets are available for which axles. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to stick with the 2005. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to stick primarily to the 2005 and up Ford Super Duty axles, because those are the ones that I have under my rig. Those are the ones I've done the most research on. I will cover a little bit on other axles, however, I'm going to primarily stick to the 2005s. For gear sets, I had originally wanted to try to keep the factory gears that came with the axles in there and then build as I went. Now, it was one of those things where it was during COVID, stimulus money was kind of flowing, so I went ahead and splurged on 538s from Yukon. If I were to do it again, I really would. The Yukon gear sets went in without issue. I got most of my stuff from East Coast Gear Supply. Definitely check them out if you're looking for gear stuff. They were able to answer all my questions and give me exactly what I needed the first time, so no issues there. For the 2005 Dana 60, it looks like the range of gear sets that are available range between the 354s all the way up to 538s, which is what I run. It seems to pair pretty well with the stock 4.0 Jeep engine, as well as the 40-inch tires. I scoot around pretty good. I can get up to highway speeds. It is torquey. So I think I made the right decision there. For the rear 10.5 Sterling, that's where it gets a little convoluted. A lot of times you kind of have to go and search for gears and gear sets in the 10.25 Sterling rear, because there's more of an aftermarket for that. It is the same axle. I believe the pinion is a little longer for the 10.25. So you just need to get the right setup kit for it. Contact East Coast Gear Supply. They should have it, and they should be able to steer you in the right direction. And I believe all the gear sets that I mentioned for the Dana 60 are available for the Sterling as well. So when it comes to lockers for the Dana 60, there's a wide range you can choose from. There's mechanical and selectable. For the mechanical, I kind of threw a spool in there. There's lunchbox lockers from, say, Spartan or Torque. There's also kind of the full carrier mechanical lockers, which are kind of like the Detroit True Track or the Grizzly, the Yukon Grizzly locker, which are basically full carrier gear-driven lockers. And then there's also the selectable lockers. ARB offers an air locker. Yukon offers the zip locker, which is selectable. Eaton offers an e-locker. And there's also the aux locker. The aux locker can be air, electric, cable, or manual. You literally screw in a bolt into the diff cover and it locks it. It's a pretty cool thing. Now, I have a spool in the front of FM. I'm not very happy with it. In fact, if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have went with either a Grizzly locker in the front, so it would help me out on the trail when I was turning and kind of navigating from obstacle to obstacle. And if I really wanted to splurge, I probably would have went with an aux locker. I really like the adaptability to be able to do electric, air, cable, or manual. I really like that. I like mechanical lockers because there's less to go wrong. For the Sterling, it's pretty much the same setup as the Dana 60. You have your spool, you have your mechanical lockers, and you have your selectable lockers. Pretty much it's all the same companies that are offering the same stuff. Get on Google, take a look to see what your budget allows and what you really want to do. I'm running a Grizzly locker in the rear, and I would do it again if I had that choice, because it's a good price point. The locker is always there. It's done pretty well on the trail for me. I would do it again. So take a look at those. All right, next question. All right, a question from Greens Farm Woodworking on Instagram. Have I ever been hassled by cops while driving my rig on the street? The answer to that is surprisingly no. And in fact, the only time I've ever had a real issue with the cops driving my Jeep on the street was when I first got it, 4 years ago. I didn't fully stop at a stop sign. It was kind of a roll through in my neighborhood of all things. And I got pulled over. The guy kind of looked it up and down as he walked up to it. Was wondering where the fenders were, but it really didn't hassle me too much outside of giving me a warning, asking me to stop at that stop sign. So lesson learned. So the next question comes from Tyler's Jeep on Facebook. He asked, wheel mounting surface, how wide and why? And typical 10.5 versus 14 bolt at the beginning of research stage. So let's get into that. Phone does not like me. Okay. So basically from wheel mounting surface to wheel mounting surface across is 72 inches. And the Sterling's WMS to WMS is 68.875 inches. And they do that to help scrub radius, or turn radius. Having the rear axle smaller makes it easier to turn, in theory. I'm not exactly sure. Other cool axle specs, based on what I'm reading here. The lug pattern is an 8 by 170. The wheel studs are 14 mil by 150. And the approximate weight of a fully loaded axle with brakes, Dana 60, is about 750 pounds. The U-joints are 1450, and they have half-inch wall tubes. So before I get into 14 volt versus Sterling debate, I'm just going to come out and say the reason I ran with a Sterling is because they're pretty cheap, they're pretty plentiful, the aftermarket's pretty good, and I bought it as a pair. I bought my axles as a pair, so why not? You know, it's a 1-ton axle. It works with my front axle. Same bolt pattern and everything. I didn't have to mess around with getting adapters or getting different rims, so why not? For me, sheer convenience. So why would somebody choose a 14 bolt over a Sterling or vice versa? So this debate is it's a very long one. There's many people on one side or the other. I'm partial to both, to be honest with you. I like the Sterlings because they're pretty plentiful. They're pretty cheap. In my area up in the Northeast right now, 14 bolts are at a premium. Picking them up, you're gonna spend, between $500, $600, $700, $800, depending on which one you get. Is it the corporate one, I believe? Does it have calipers? Is it complete? Things like that. So you're really paying a lot of money. Personal opinion here, I think that the 14 bolt is a better option if you're gonna throw heavy horsepower. And let me explain why before people start tearing my head off. The pinion support built into the housing, I really love that idea. It keeps the pinion from flexing. And ultimately, when you start flexing things internally into a differential, that's when catastrophic things start to break. So being able to kind of keep that deflection to a minimum, you only prolong the life of the diff. Now, the other thing for me, once again, sheer convenience and a lazy do-it-yourself mechanic, is I love the spanner style adjustment inside the diff. So you don't need to use shims on a 14 bolt. It's a spanner style, and you literally just thread the adjustment in or out to set your preload. To set your carrier preload. So I do see two cons with the 14 bolt. One, it does tend to hang a little lower than the Sterling for ground clearance, and that's why everybody shaves the crap out of a 14 bolt. And they do shave Sterlings as well as Dana 60s, and that shaving is kind of becoming the norm now. The second con that I see with the 14 bolt is that it's slightly narrower than the Sterling, and it does have different bolt pattern. Now, for those who are really driven to use the 14 bolt, all the power to you. It's a great axle. It's awesome. It's probably the better one out there. But I, once again, sheerly convenience, didn't want to have to use spacers, didn't want to have to re-drill hubs, didn't want to have to get new rims or re-drill rims. Sheerly convenience. So really, it's up to you. If you can come across a 14 bolt cheap and you want to put the time in, go for it. I'd say it's definitely a better axle, especially if you're going to be running heavy horsepower. Another question I got is full hydro versus hydro assist. Which one is better? Thanks, Cody, for the question. My opinion and my opinion alone, if you are driving on the street and you're going to be driving at any length on the street, I would highly suggest keeping the hydro assist. It keeps the mechanical link between the vehicle and the axle. It allows you to steer if you lose engine power. It also provides feedback, and it also does help take some of the strain off the unibody where the steering box is mounted when you turn. The ram that's usually bolted to the axle and it moves the tie rod for you, takes a lot of force off that unibody rail and prevents or helps prevent some cracking at the unibody rail. Besides, most states still require you to have mechanical steering linkage if you are driving on the streets, and it's a safety issue. So if you are driving on the streets, it's probably better that you keep that there. So for the other side of that question, I do intend on researching doing full hydro for FM. I like the idea of just having the ram doing all the steering, and I can kind of set it and forget it. It simplifies the steering so I don't have the binding of the tie rod and drag link. I can open up my turning radius a little bit more. The only concerns I do have is how low I mount the ram. I've seen too many times where people put the full ram a little too low, and that's literally the first thing that hammers into rocks when you're rock crawling. So I do have more research to do, but I am heavily considering going full hydro on FM. The long-winded answer aside, it's really up to you, your budget, and your application. Are you going to be on the road? Are you going to be primarily off-road? Do you want better turning radius? Can you live without it? Things like that. So you kind of have to weigh your options. Ace Team off YouTube asks, should I change my transfer case before doing the swap? I have an MP231. So I'm still running the factory MP231. The only things I've done to it is a SYE for the rear output, and then I did a Novak cable shifter. Other than that, that's it. I mean, you could do some things if you really want to dive into it. I think one thing that I might look into if I don't do like a doubler or an aftermarket transfer case is the six planetary gear swap and the thicker chain for the MP231. I'm still kind of up in the air what I want to do with transfer case. I was looking into doing one of the Midnight metals, Dana 30 ones. So there's options out there. An Atlas if you want to wait, or you can find one used. And there's a ton of doublers that you can build if you're inclined to do so. Definitely do your homework. That's kind of an area that I'm now getting into. But an MP231 in my setup has held up just fine, as long as you don't literally full send on everything. You should be fine. So Ace Team submitted another question. What suspension do I suggest for a Dana 60? Now, honestly, for the front, I would suggest long arms, especially ones that are either adjustable or DIY, because it gives you the ability to kind of place that front tire where you need it. I placed the front tire originally, found that I was too close to the rock slider, so I had to push the axle forward, and when I did that, I maxed out my Iron Rock off-road kit, and I was also running into some binding issues with how those arms are bent. But long story short, I would suggest getting some make your own links. I mean, if you already have a long arm kit, you could probably just use the cross member and build your own links, and that way you're not kind of stuck with some off-the-shelf stuff that may not work. But you want flexibility. You want to be able to kind of move the arms where you need to move the arms and things like that. For the rear, I know plenty of people who have kept the factory leafs, do a leaf flip, or they find other leaves that work. I was going to originally do the leaf flip, but I ran into some issues with the rear leaf boxes rotting out, and once again, APP came out with their full belly kit, and I really love the look of it, and that's why I took that route. But really, you just want stuff that's going to be flexible, that you can modify to fit your application. So another YouTube question from Man of the Croc. What is the best year range to look for axles? Do I need steering assist? And can I use dually axles? I would say the best year range to look for is 2005 and up. They're the most coveted. I think off the shelf, like in its true form, out of the junkyard, it's probably one of the stronger ones. Not to say that the 99 to 2004 can't be or aren't. And those are, once again, perfectly fine axles, but I think to kind of overbuild, especially in stock XJ form, the 05s are probably worth a little bit extra money you'd pay. And there's so much aftermarket for them. I would, if I were going to do it again, I would still stick with the 2005 and up axles, because they're plentiful, they're easy to work on, and they've been done a million times over. So if you do have a question, someone's probably already run into it, and you can find out the answer pretty quickly. And for the steering part of that question, I would say absolutely look for some type of steering assist, whether that be hydro assist or full hydro. Because if you think about it, I believe the newest one of these Jeeps available in the US is going to be at the time of this video, 21 years old. That's the newest one. The unibodies on these things are layered sheet metal. They are not very thick. Where the steering box is mounted on these things takes a lot of force, lateral force from steering. I've seen, I've cracked my unibody just on 35s, and now you're throwing 40s and a 750-pound axle underneath. So that's a lot of weight on the front end, much bigger tires. So yes, I would 100% say you would need some type of steering assist to take a lot of that force off that unibody, unless you plan on repairing it quite often. And once you repair it, it most likely won't be nearly as good in factory form. So you want to catch it before it does crack. But that's just my opinion. And for the dually question, if you find a truck that is set up for dually and it's got the front Dana 60, I believe the front Dana 60 will work. It's, I believe, the same one. It's the rear axle, the rear Sterling. I've seen it kind of go both ways. I don't know for sure, but my understanding is that it is longer than the normal Sterling. Some people have told me that it's really just an adapter that extends it out so you can run two tires, but I'm not 100% sure, so unfortunately I can't answer that right now. But I believe the front Dana 60 will work. So before we get into the main topic of what it costs to put 1 tons under this XJ, let me outline what that cost covers. So that cost covers junkyard axles, new brakes, new calipers, some U-joints here and there, steering linkage, track bar, bead locks, a new rear drive shaft, gears, lockers, diff covers, and a fuel cell, and hydro assist to steering. So the grand total after all of that, and I did not pay to have anything re-geared, I did it my own, was $9,200. Now, it could be done cheaper. If you can find 410 factory gears with an e-locker from an F250 or F350, you're actually ahead of the game. You could probably run 410s and be okay. I know people do use the factory e-locker from Ford. They find a way to wire it up, and then you save a ton of money there. You save, I think a big chunk of my gears and lockers was probably about $2,300. So you save a ton of money there. And then really it's just bead locks and tires. And right now, with COVID kind of jamming up the tire prices, that might be a big bucket to fill. But if you can find some used 40s, 39s, 38s, 37s, whatever you really want. Although if you're going to go 1 tons on an XJ, you might want to do between 38s and 40s, just so that way you have some clearance. So that's it. I just want to come out and say that I am not the foremost expert on 1 tons. I'm far from it. There are definitely way more people out there that have much more knowledge. I'm just a guy who kind of bumped my way through it in a garage, as you can see, and I did it on my own. But if you guys have any questions, comments, leave those down below. I'll try to help you the best I can. If you guys think you could have done better, let me know too. I'm pretty sure you will. So with that being said, we'll catch you on the next one.